Hello and a very warm welcome to you all. Now, if pigs really could fly, life on the farm would be very different for a variety of reasons. But this programme is not about the impossible, because while most of the livestock is still confined to the land, there is a revolution in the sky that is breeding a new generation of farmers. Very good to have you with us. You're watching Roundtable with me, David Foster. Drones, or flying robots that can spot crop disease, check where your sheep or your cows are, and can reach farmland that humans find inaccessible. All now possible, and making this the age of a new agricultural revolution.
Robots have invaded our farms, picking our veg and cutting crops. Farmers are increasingly turning to drones to boost the growth of their plants and their profits. According to new industry figures, investment in the agri-tech sector surged more than 40% worldwide in 2018 to $17 billion. Food industries are under pressure from a growing global population, which the UN says could reach 9.8 billion by 2050. A population rush from rural to urban regions and declining numbers of farmers are additional challenges to world farming. Automation could help, but it's expensive and there are fears it will cause job losses. Will robotic innovation solve the world's food problems, and at what cost?
And I'm very pleased to say that joining us from Washington D.C. we have Jenny Splitter, science and health writer at Forbes. From Bristol in the west of the UK, Patrick Holden joins us, founder of the Sustainable Food Trust. And with me at the round table, we have Vicki Hird, food and farming policy expert, and Jack Wragham, co-founder of Drone Ag. And thank you all for coming in. But I'm going to start with Jack, and I'm going to start with this drone, which you use how?
So we use this mainly for crop walking, replacing crop walking. So to cover a field much faster than you can on foot by hopping the drone around the field to multiple points, taking a photo and then syncing that back to the user's phone. And
the farmer has the means of controlling not just the flight, but also an app which tells him information like more pesticide needed there, more water needed there, bare patches of earth. I'm guessing, yeah, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, the drone, the way the drone drives is completely automated. So the farmer just tells it what he needs and the drone goes off and gets the information. But it's not directly interpreting everything for the farmer. The farmer still needs to take that information, like there's a weed here, or there's a disease here, or the green area index in this part is this, and then decide what then to act on that information, what to do with it.
And Jack, you will tell me how you use it on your farm. You've got several thousand acres up in the northeast of England. Tell me about that in just a moment. But Vicki, let me ask you, we're also talking about robots on the ground, aren't we?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a growth in businesses looking at small-scale robots, which will do a lot of the jobs that obviously an aerial robot can't do, assessing on ground and doing some of the application of chemicals, possibly assessing how much water is needed more closely, looking at varieties and assessing whether they're working well or maybe other varieties of plants be needed. All these kind of small-scale applications are going to be potentially lower impacts, like lower compacting of the soil, which could be a good thing.
Oh, so you mean instead of having tractors down there and people in heavy boots going down
they
there,
might
these
be able
very
to do
light
it without
robots could do it without disturbing the soil as much?
Yeah,
which is
the
good
idea.
for the growth.
Yeah. But I think we've got to be careful not to take the people out of the equation and the knowledge, and still know, farmers still need to know their farm and their soil more than ever.
And we will talk about that as we go on. I'm just interested in the technology at the moment. Jenny, it's come on leaps and bounds, hasn't it? I was just thinking as Vicki was talking there that it's perhaps a little bit like the car revolution we saw back in the late 60s, early 70s, where everybody was saying all humans are going to be replaced. It will all be robotic. Is that what is going to happen here?
I don't think you'll ever be able to take people out of the equation, as you just said. You're always going to need farmers caring about the farm and sort of being able to program the machinery, being able to analyze the data. That's actually a huge challenge right now in farming. Farmers are able to get all of this data, but they need to be able to know how to use it and apply that data to make good decisions on their farm.
But your thought is, as I understand it, that artificial intelligence and robotics will come closer and closer together so that most jobs can be done by a robot. And I wonder if, in fact, it can think for a farmer and tell him, actually, you're a bit wrong. What needs to be done is this, because I've worked it out better than you have.
Well, yeah, I don't think it's ever going to replace people altogether, but I just had covered a few of the kind of surveys of the year in ag tech funding, and one of the venture capitalists I spoke with mentioned that sort of the robotics companies that they're kind of further along are combining artificial intelligence with robotics so that you kind of, maximize the robots' potential on the field to be able to really do it intelligently, I guess. But yeah, you're never going to completely take people out of the equation. But we do have a labor shortage in our country, especially in California, on the farm. So a lot of what's driving the interest in robotics in the ag tech sector here is being able to find somebody to pick the fruit.
Well, I don't want to get too political, but is that something that's happened in the current political climate with the certain US president sending an awful lot of people who used to work on the farms back where they came from?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's not just my opinion. It's from people I've been speaking with.
So the same might happen in a lot of westernized countries that are seeing a polarizing of politics. Patrick, I don't want to get too political about this, but we might suffer from a shortage of workers in the UK, depending on what's going to happen in the next few months. So your thoughts on this and where we're going before I ask you about your own farm?
Well, I think like all technologies, they can be used for good or ill. And certainly this technology is going to change the future of food and farming. It's already having an influence on my farm. But my question is, we've witnessed during the last century a huge flight from the land. More and more people are moving into cities. And meaningful physical work is now at a premium. What do we do to keep fit and healthy? The answer is we go down to the gym. And yet, ironically, on farms, including my own farm, the daily routine of physical activity is one of the most fulfilling parts of my work when I'm actually involved with farming. I'm talking about it as well these days, of course. And I think we have to ask ourselves the question, what is the role of people in the future of food production? Do we want to get rid of it ourselves altogether from the equation and replace everything with robots? Well, I don't think so.
Can I ask you this then? I mean, are there enough people in the world, perhaps, if they're well paid enough, which perhaps they're not, that's another matter, but are there enough people in the world who could go into agricultural production to produce the amount of food that we are going to need, or is it going to have to be robots?
No, there are plenty of people in the world, quite enough if we could pay them a reasonable wage to produce enough food to feed us all. And in fact, the bigger issue is what are we going to do with all the people who are leaving the land and going to these huge urban monstrosities, which is going to be the future. It's already more than 50% of the world population live in cities. It'll get bigger. And actually, have we got enough work for them in cities? Or is it just going to be a world of leisure? And then I would argue less meaning in our working lives.
You have cows. You have cows on your farm in West Wales. You also produce cheese. Do you take advantage of the sort of technology we've been talking about?
Well, yes, to a degree, but the two innovations that I could introduce and haven't yet are a robotic milker. So we milk our cows in a 10 abreast milking parlor, which means that it's a physical hands-on process. We're literally physically in contact with the cows. And then when we make cheese in the cheese store, we turn them by hand. Now, we could replace me with a robot. And in the cheese store, I just was talking to somebody the other day whose cheese turner turns 18,000 cheeses a week in the store, and he's about to put in a robot. And the question is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because what's this cheese man in the store going to do? He's probably going to go down to the gym and lift weights to keep up his physical strength after he leaves the cheese store. Meaningful physical work on the land, it's going to become increasingly at a premium. And I wonder if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Jenny, and this is where I want to go now. Everybody can jump in at this particular point. But let me ask you, first of all, Jenny, do you think this is going to be able to is it going to result in increased food production, which will undoubtedly be of benefit to the world?
I think definitely this is one technology that can help increase food production. And we probably need a lot of different technologies. Not probably, we certainly need a lot of technologies to make that happen. We have to feed a huge amount of people, as you cited the UN number, which doesn't mean we have to kind of ignore the planet or do it in a way that's not sustainable. There's a new concept or an evolving theory called sustainable intensification that uses a lot of these different new technologies to kind of intensify crop growth, but also take care to consider conservation and land resources and do it in a way that makes sense and preserves the planet.
Vicki, I think you wanted to say something there.
I think this idea that we've got to increase production and yields is got to be challenged. We actually produce enough food to feed 12 billion people. We just don't use it effectively. You know, we don't necessarily produce the right foods. We've got to stop waste and loss and damage, which robotics could help with. But we've got to be really honest about what the food is used for, and a lot of it is wasted.
I have to say, we have talked about that in separate programs.
I'm not,
maybe there's plenty of room for talking about it on another occasion.
Yeah, but that productivity is one thing.
Revolution.
Yeah, production is another, and let's get productivity right.
Food waste is certainly part of the issue. So that's a very complex problem, right? And we have to address it in lots of different ways. There are many researchers who are saying that we do need to both increase yields and do it sustainably.
And efficiently as well. So Jack, let's come back to this little beauty here. This is the one that tells you what needs to be done. You then have the, allow me the oversimplification. You then have the bigger ones which can spray.
Yes, yeah.
Yes. And you also have ones that can go out to bits of farmland that you cannot reach. So you could potentially, instead of having, I think you've got 7,000 acres, 6,000?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. You could, with the same number of people and with this sort of equipment, perhaps successfully farm 10 times that amount of land. Do you think?
Yeah, I think that's one way of looking at it. I think you could successfully farm to the same kind of level, more land, or you could farm the land you have better. So you can cover, you know, a farmer walking in the field right now might only walk to 3 or 4 points in that field, get a good understanding of what's going on a broad level, but he might miss something. So the farmer can still go into that field, but the drone can also cover loads more points in that field as well. And that means they can start to be better with their timings and better with where they're applying things. And it leads into less machinery on the land, less chemicals being put on the land, which leads to sustainability and all that kind of thing, while also hopefully increasing yield.
Let's talk about the people here as well, because what I'm trying to get at is if you find that the number of people you need for your 6,000 acres is reduced by, let's say, 1/10, yeah, bear with me on this one, but you can increase the amount of land farmed by 20-fold, yeah, they're then going to need an expanded workforce, therefore you don't actually get rid of people because they're either going to be needed in the far corners of the farm, they're either going to be needed in packaging or in helping to market the product. So rather like the first agricultural, the first industrial revolution, when everybody thought their jobs were going to go, jobs were created in the chain. So should we worry about the number of people that this could put out of work?
Yeah, I think inevitably you will see less if you don't manage the transition properly and build in new systems of farming where the farmer is also possibly doing the processing and packing on farm and doing the marketing and getting to local or regional supply chains. Because at the moment, as Patrick said quite rightly, if farmers aren't getting the right price, they can't do any of this in a way which sustains jobs and sustains the environment and looks after the animals. So we have to manage that transition and help farmers. You know, whether it could provide more jobs and more skilled jobs is exciting, you know, especially for farm workers who need to find ways of getting a more rewarding job.
Just a quick one to Jack. Have you had to lose any people on your farm because of this?
No, not yet. We're actually looking for people at the moment. We've got an aging workforce, and they'll be retiring over the next few years. And we're certainly not thinking we're not going to need anyone to come back in. We're actually looking at, okay, who we're going to employ to come back in. But the people we're looking to employ to come back in will probably have slightly different roles. So we'll be looking for people that maybe are a bit more technological savvy, understand, not necessarily have direct experience with drones or anything like that, but people that we know we could train to use that kind of technology more easily if needed. So I think
So it's not just going to be
we'll see
the
a
guy
change in
who
roles.
can pitchfork the bales, it's going to be the guy who used to be able to do that but has got the ability and the desire to sort of retrain and do something.
Yeah,
something
definitely. I mean, you
different.
know, you see a lot of young people that are perfectly willing to go out to the farm and crack on with whatever, but also are interested in technology and what that can do as well. And there's certainly the two can definitely mix.
I think that is true. There is a lot of people who do want to get into farming. All the, you know, the colleges are saying there's interest, but it's in a different way than doing the basics. But the problem is if these systems come in as contractual ones, people just parachute in, do the tech, do the data analysis, and then go away again. You're losing the rural communities and the rural farm cohesion that we need.
Patrick, let me put this to you, because I think organic is one of your big things as well, and presumably you don't use pesticides. But if this allows for fewer pesticides to be used on farms where it is allowable, then that must be a good thing, because it can identify areas more efficiently, and it can work out even better how much should be used on a particular area, and this would, by extension, reduce the amount of pesticides that are used.
Well, obviously this program isn't a debate about the use of chemicals and pesticides in agriculture, but I think you're bringing up an important point, because I used to be quite a large-scale carrot grower for supermarkets, and of course one of the tasks involved in producing carrots is hand weeding, because it's difficult to get the weeds between the plants. You can mechanically cultivate between the rows, but the weeds that grow between the plants are difficult to get rid of. And of course, a robot camera could probably achieve that and then vastly reduce the number of hours that I used to spend myself in the fields hand weeding carrots. And that brings up an interesting question. Is hand weeding carrots on an organic farm in West Wales a good thing or a bad thing? I used to employ quite a lot of school children to do that. Possibly it built their characters. But now we have a situation where in vast, huge factory food processing outfits, like there's an abattoir near us, a slaughterhouse which kills 2 million lambs a year. The people that work there are all Polish or Romanian speaking, because we've really confined that kind of work to an economic underclass of migrants, if you want to put it that way, economic migrants. And you could even further rationalize the slaughterhouse process by getting robots in there. But is that the kind of future that we want for our food? I mean, it is a question.
Yeah.
So I think I'm not turning my back on technology or robots. I'm simply saying we've got some big ethical questions here to address.
Okay. Jenny, let me ask you this one. It by extension, follows on from what Patrick was saying. If it is useful in picking out the weeds more efficiently between the particular rows of carrots, and you're a farm that doesn't use pesticides, where else do you think it could benefit organic farmers, which is a growing movement?
Yeah, well, many organic farms, at least in the US under regulation, can use pesticides. They just need to be natural in origin. But there aren't any herbicides specifically approved. So that's why that weeding is very challenging. And that's a lot of labor involved. So I just hate to fully romanticize farm work because it's very hard. And there's a lot of farm workers working under very difficult conditions, very long hours, and an aging population as well. So I think it's not a bad thing to be able to relieve some of those man hours. Some of the technology that they're looking at for robots is the weeding, and then also for fruit in particular, kind of shaking the trees. There's different applications within the harvest process that they're looking at. So fruit picking is definitely one of the bigger areas, as well as trying to sort of crack the code on figuring out an alternative to herbicides and organic farming, figuring out how to de-weed in this large scale.
Okay, so it's pretty endless, but let's be specific. Okay, on your farm, how has this little thing and the bigger ones, do you use the bigger ones as well? Spray. How have they changed your life?
These just allow us to be a lot more accurate, and especially when it comes to inputs. You know, we can map fields, we can map them at any time rather than satellite where we have cloud cover issues. We can cover a field anytime we want, and we can use that information to decide how much fertilizer, for instance, we're going to put where. Right coming into now when we need to put fertilizer on oilseed rape, for instance. And the mapping allows us to decide where we put the fertilizer and also where we don't put it. And generally, what we actually see is we use less fertilizer, which obviously is great for the environment, but also it's great for us because it means we cost less. We save a lot of money doing that. So being selected like that is really
You don't at the moment have the machines that would then go out and put the fertilizer down for you?
The spraying and spreading side of things, the technology is definitely there, but it's not legal in the UK at the moment. We can't spray pesticides from a drone. We're working with a few other partners on getting it all legalised, but at the moment we're just doing tests with water to prove that it's safe, essentially.
And one of the other things I think you're a bit concerned about is that you have to have a drone operator within the line of sight of the drone. In other words, he or she has to be able to see where the little devil is, and you think if you've got a big farm, that's not going to be possible. That the law you would like to see changed there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll come. It'll come when these things can fly off by themselves wherever they need to go. It just needs to be made sure it's safe, again, and that's making sure that they understand where they are in the airspace and where other aircraft are, so there's no collisions or anything like that.
Yeah, of course.
But yes,
and equally, I mean, not only could you pick your carrots and do your spraying and check where you need water, but you might be able to deliver a parcel as well. But that's me.
Can I say something to Jack?
Yeah, Patrick, yeah.
It's interesting that we have more and more young people who want to come and work on our farm, and they don't really want to work on a vast semi-industrial, very large-scale farm. I'm not denigrating it, but that's not the kind of farming system they're interested in. They want to get involved with diversity, with milking cows by hand, with making an artisan cheese, and with growing, not on my farm at the moment, but growing vegetables in a more sustainable way. And I think some of them are interested in tech and robots, but a lot more of them are interested in becoming involved with a farming system which has diversity and has people on it, because there's a cultural dimension to farming, which I think is the victim of this mass industrialization of agriculture.
What about putting another label on it? Give us a second. Which is, instead of just saying it's artisan, it's over-romanticized.
Well, it may be over-romanticized, but it's what we are practicing. And what we're experiencing directly is more and more young people are interested in coming to work with us. And I'm not trying to create a polarized debate about this. I'm asking the question for us all, really. What kind of rural society do we wish to have in the future? Do we want to employ young, well-educated people who come from cities, as I did, and gone back to the land? Or do we just want to replace all the people with robots? It's a serious discussion.
Yeah. What about both? What about both in this instance, Jenny, that you have the, I won't call it over-romanticised, some people might do. You have the quaint type of farming, if you like to put it that way, alongside the industrialised, if you want to put it that way, because that's the best way that both can survive.
Right. I don't think there has to be either or, and I think that I don't think there ever will be completely one or the other. I think we just have to look at what the sort of research and data shows as far as how to best kind of feed a growing population. But I think there's a space for small farms and a space for large scale farms. And I think a lot of innovation can happen, and a lot of biodiversity can even happen on a large scale farm. There's lots of new ways to kind of cross-pollinate some of these ideas. They don't have to always be a completely separate. Organic doesn't have to be on one end from a large scale farm, and even beyond organic, there's regenerative agriculture is sort of the latest term. And what does that even mean? Because there's a debate about that.
And I think that's for another program, regenerative agriculture. We can't go into that one today. We can't talk about everything. Jack, let's come back to you and your farm and your hopes for something like this. Are you seeing a lot more farmers wanting to take this idea up, or are you seeing also, as Patrick suggests, that there is this sort of sense that we might be losing something with this?
I don't think we're losing something, at least not yet. From my experience, for me personally, I was a web designer before I did all this for a good while. Sat in front of the computer, 9 to 5 in an office.
But you do have a family farm.
And yeah, but that was in between everything, moving about, doing loads of different stuff. And me getting into how we can use drone technology in the farm got me back outside. It got me back on the farm, and that was great for me. And I love doing that. I love being outside. And this was my route into being outside more and more and more, rather than just sitting in a tractor or whatever and that kind of thing. So it was more interesting, and I think there's a lot of people like that. That said, I think on the wider scale, if you look at cost of production, for instance, we do need to feed a growing global population, and we do need to do that with relatively cheap food overall to allow everyone to be able to afford it. But there are always going to be people that want to get really high quality food, food that was hand farmed down the line maybe, you know, a food that was farmed in a specific way and taken lots of care of. The cost of production of that food will be a lot higher. So it'll be the people that want to pay for that food will pay for it. And I think there will definitely be a place for that. And I want there to be a place for that.
I know everybody has a lot more to say, but unfortunately we don't have time for it. I think it's a question of symbiosis here, really, isn't it? Everybody rubbing along together, making sure that we waste less food, we produce it more efficiently, we allow the fact that you can have sort of industrialised food on one side and artisan food on the other. Thank you. It's been fascinating. So many more programme ideas have come out of this. Thank you very much indeed, Jenny. Patrick, good luck down on the farm in West Wales. And thank you both for coming into the studio. Don't forget to take that one home with you. Jack, good luck. Up with the cows tomorrow. Thank you very much indeed. From me, David Foster, and the Roundtable team, we hope to have your company next time. Goodbye for now.